morning, everyone.
Good
Before we start,
morning.
any queries from the previous sessions? If there are no queries, that looks like you're not finding time to go through the notebooks. Is that right? Good. So, let's start with today's activities. So, we should start. So, you have Subbarao, Rishabh, Hemant, Manu, and Manu. So, we'll do a quick recap of a few important concepts that we have learned earlier, so that those concepts gets refreshed in our mind. As I was mentioning that more and more we do it ourselves, more and more we revise, these things will get updated. So we learned about the concept of a data frame in pandas, and pandas data frame is like an Excel table. It's a two-dimensional structure of data, and that we saw how we can create a data frame by passing a series of lists to it, and then each list is a vector. It means it is a one-dimensional data, and then in the data frame, as we combine these frames, it becomes two-dimensional data. We have not yet introduced you to the other types of data, but the data frame can be created not just by the list, but we can use a dictionary, we can use an panda series, numpy array, and there are certain other data types like dictionary and set. All those can be used to create data frame, but I don't want to overload with different types of names and concepts immediately. We will come to these at some later point in time. But right now we have seen how we can create data frame with the help of lists. Then we saw how to slice it. While slicing, the important concepts were, slicing the data frame. We have seen earlier how to slice a list. That part we have done. So in slicing the data frame, there are two main ways. One is by giving the index, and the second is by giving the name of the row or name of the column. And these are called the iloc and the loc function. And we have tried out different ways to slice it, seeing only the identified columns or seeing only the identified rows or a combination of them. We also saw that we can give a condition, that is the logical or the Boolean index, like age is equal to 10, and then we can see that in which rows the age is equal to 10. So slicing of the data frames we have seen. Then we saw certain other operation and concepts. We saw the concept of transposing, where the columns become the rows and the rows becomes the column. We saw how to see the index numbers and the column names through append and extend. No, we saw how to add a column by adding a column name and giving what the values of that column would be. Concatenation we will see today. A sort we have seen, filter we saw through the lock and the ilock. And there are certain other statistical operations they can do on that we can do on the entire data frame or on one of the columns. Some of these things we will see as we go into session today. Control flow, then we saw that if we have to manipulate data, then many a times we need to use conditions or we need to use recursion. It means that the same command, the system has to operate more than once. And that's where the concept of the conditions and the control flow comes in. We saw how to use if, elif, and else. Then we saw how to use the while loop. And while loop is that it evaluates a condition, while condition. And if that condition is met, or if the value of this condition is true, then it goes and executes whatever are the statements following the while loop. And the moment this condition is not met, or the moment the evaluation of this condition becomes false, then it exits the loop. That is how the while loop works. Then we also saw how to define it. We will come to some of the exercises which I want you to do in the session today. We'll come to that. Then we saw another type of loop, which is the for loop. And the for loop, we saw that it iterates over a list or a range. Or broadly speaking, we say that the for loop works on any of the iterables. And when we say iterables, there are certain other types of data structures which are iterable. So for example, list and range we had discussed already. Even the string, it is iterable over a string. It means that after we say for I in, we can give a string, or we can give a dictionary, we can give a tuple, we can give a set. And as I mentioned earlier, that we will get introduced to these other data types like dictionary or a tuple or a set. Sometime next week, we will get introduced to these data types also. So the for loop works on what we call as the iterable objects in Python. And these are the iterable objects, not just the list and the range, but certain other types of things also can be used in iteration for the for loop. The for loop can also be followed by an else, which we had not taken an example earlier, but it can also be followed by an else. And that is something which gets printed after the for loop is over. We will show you one example today. So how does the iteration happens? If there is an iterable object A, then the system creates what we call as the iter object, and then it takes each item one by one, and then once the last item is over, then it stops iteration. We saw how to define a range and how to do the iteration or a for loop over a range. So we can define range also has the same structure as we are doing for slicing, that is start, stop, and the steps. These are the three things in the range. We also saw how to break a loop. So if we say that certain condition is met, then break, then that point onwards, it stops the loop, it breaks the loop there. Or we can say continue. It means that if that condition is met, then it will continue, that is, it will not execute the rest of the loop and it will go back to the evaluation of the loop or the first line of the loop once again. So in this case, if we say if I is less than 4 and then continue, it means that until I is less than 4, it will not execute the next line or the subsequent commands inside the loop. Okay. So today we will come to how to handle certain exceptions, as we have seen during our course of trying out different things in Python. We saw that certain times we will make errors, and we also need to learn how to handle those errors. So let's come to that part. We are done with the loops. Okay. Now you are seeing this print command, and it is, first let me close this one. Now tell me whether it will print or is there an error. Can you make a guess that whether there will be an error or it will be print, and if there is an error, what's the error? Anyone?
Error.
What's the problem here?
Because single quote again, I think system not recognize print. We should print or for I to N or last also either no? Three single
Yeah. So
quote.
you're right. So how the system will interpret it, that now that we are giving it inside a single quote, it will look for the next single quote to understand that where the string ends. So it will come to the single quote here, which is a part of the word don't, and then it will treat this as if the string has ended. Now, once the string has ended, then it says that the character T comes, which it is not able to interpret because it is not another string, it is not another variable. So it is not able to understand that how it is, what is this T, and therefore it will show an error. Now, these kind of things are called the syntax error. It means that there is an error in the way that we are writing the code, or that way that we are writing the syntax, that itself is containing an error. Now, what happens in the cell here is that once we ask or once we click on the play button, the first thing that Python does is that it will go through all the lines which is contained in the cell and see if there is a syntax error. If there is a syntax error, then it will not start execution of the code here. But if there is no syntax error, then it will start execution of the code. And during the execution of the code, we may come across certain exceptions. So for example, the variable that we are trying to use, that variable has not been defined, or the type of the variable is wrong. So for example, if we are here, if you're trying to concatenate a string with a integer, so there are different types of exceptions which the system would identify during the course of the execution. And that's the difference in Python between the syntax error and the exceptions. Exceptions can be of different types, and we will see some of them. So that is what, if there is a syntax error, it will show you. And then I'll also show you that how to handle the exceptions. But the syntax errors, they can't be handled through exceptions. So that will show as a syntax error. We can catch and handle the exceptions in a different way that we will see here. So it is important to understand the syntax error and the exception. And the syntax error, so the process is that first the Java will parse through the code that is there. And if there is syntax error, it will show first. Only if there is no syntax error, then it starts the execution of the code. And then during the execution, it may find certain exceptions, which is shown as exceptions. Okay. And as we go to the string operation, we'll see that how to handle this problem where the single quote, double quote. So if I still want to print, I don't care with a single quote, one of the simple ways is that I put that in the double quote. So now the start is double quote. So now Python will look for double quote to determine where this string ends. So it will not care about the single quote, it will look for the double quote. And if I run this, it gives me the print. So that's one of the simple ways. We will see the other ways to handle some of these issues. Okay. So now we come to that during the course of running the program, if we are expecting certain errors, or if we want to see those what those errors are. Anyway, those things would be shown even if you don't catch an exceptions. Those things will be shown below the uh, cell as we are seeing here, not just the syntax error. If I say here, or let me introduce one more cell. If I say here print 1 by 0, it will show you the error anyway. But it's a very, if you want to give our own description of the error, or so here what happens is that there are two things why we need to handle the exception. One is that we can express these errors the way that we want. Otherwise, the system will show the way the error is handling. And the second thing is, which is more important, is that once the error is encountered, and if we are not handling the error, the execution of the program will actually stop. So for example, here, if I am giving another command here, print x. Now, since it is encountering an error in the first line, it will not even execute the second line. Okay. But if I want to continue running the program, then I have to handle these exceptions. So if there are unhandled exceptions, the program will come to a halt there. But if you want to continue, then we have to do the try and except. This is how we catch the exceptions and we handle the exception. So try is the block which the system will first run. And then during running of that block of code, if there is an exception, then that exception is handled in the code, which is following the except clause here. So here xyz is a variable which I have not even defined. So the system would not know what is xyz. And the second problem is I am trying to divide a string by 2. So sorry, since this one is within the code, it will not, the system will not treat that as a variable. It will treat only a string. And the problem is that if you're trying to divide the string by a number, then it will show some error. So some error has happened here, which if we give an except block to handle that error, then it will do the things that we are asking it to do during the except or inside the except block. So let's try to run this. Now there is an error here, and this error is being shown here. Now the error has been caught. This is that unsupported operand type. We are trying to divide for a divide operation, string and int. So you can't divide a string. Now if I put another thing here, say 0 by 0, then it shows that division by 0. Let's see. So you saw here that in the previous one, it did not execute the print x here because it encountered an exception and that exception was not handled. So what happens is that when we run the program, and during the course of, if there are several lines of codes which need to be run, and then if the system stops here, then we have to first go and fix that problem. Only then we can see that whether the next line is executing or not. Whereas if we handle the exception, we come to know where the error has occurred, but the rest of the program we can continue with. So we can, that saves a lot of time because you're able to see where the problem has occurred. At the same time, it does not really break there. It also executes the rest of the program. So I can see that different places where the problem has occurred, and we can see what's the problem. So that's one way of, so what we are trying to do here is that we are saying that handle the following types of exceptions, which is the value errors, zero division error, name error, type errors. These are the exceptions I want to catch. So either you can give a specific exception that we want to catch, or if we are not very sure what kind of exception would be coming and I just want to see what exception is there, then I can import sys. And once I import sys, then any kind of exception which is handled here, that will be put into a list called, an object called sys dot exception info, and then we need to read it out from that object. So the name of the, or the type of the error is the first element in that, and therefore I am printing out the first element that is at the index 0, and that is showing me. So if I run this, then see what is happening. I have defined my list as the list 1, 2, 3. In my try block, I am saying print my list 2, which is fine because then it should be showing the element in my list which is at the second place, or the index is 2. So that will print me 3. So that is being done here. Then I say print 0 by 1, which is also an valid operation. It prints the output as 0. While executing the third line, now it does not find XYZ as a variable. Now see here that XYZ is not within the code. So if it is not, so that will not be treated as a string. It will look for XYZ as a variable. And since I have not defined XYZ as a variable, now it is saying name error. So name error means that name XYZ is not defined earlier, or the system is not able to understand what this XYZ name is. So it shows an exception. Now that exception we are catching in the except block, and we are saying print the first element of the sys dot exception info object, and then it shows name error. Now if we want to look for the if we say print mylist 3, now there is no fourth element here. 3 means 0, 1, 2, 3. It will look for a fourth element. There is no fourth element in my list at all. So the system will stop in the try block. It will not be able to execute the first line itself. And then exception has been raised. So it will directly go to the except block, print the exception, and then it will end. So the second and third will not print. So within the try block, wherever the first exception occurs, the system will stop there, and then it will handle it. Now, what I was saying earlier and what I'm saying now, try to understand the difference. I said that after the exception is handled, rest of the code will continue to execute. But whatever is within this try block, Wherever I find the first exception, the system will stop operating or running the code after it encounters the first. So let's see here. Here I say print x. So now you get the difference that within the try block, if it encounters an exception, it will stop execution of any code inside the try block. Then it will execute things which we want within the except block, and then it will continue to execute the rest of the code. That is how the exceptions are handled. And that this will help us identify the exceptions and continue to run the code. So if the rest of the code is working fine, I know that I need to fix the problem only here. And there is a possibility that I am finding the problem at multiple places. All of these I can come and fix in one go. So let's see here. We want to give a zero division error. So the first one should work fine. Now the second one should give error. So it would stop here. So now you see, I have not defined what type of error I want to catch. But still I am able to extract that this is a zero division error. But for doing that, we need to import sys. These are the different ways that we will handle the errors in our system. But there would be certain situation where we would want to give or raise our own exception. Yes, tell me.
Import sys is what doing?
What is import sys?
Yeah.
So as we are importing pandas, as we are importing NumPy, similarly, sys is a library for certain system commands. So the exception, the handling of the exception or the throwing of the exception, that we have to use the sys library. And so as we go further in the course, you will get introduced to different types of libraries, and knowing that which libraries to import and which functions from the libraries we can use for different purposes, that is, in my view and in my experience, is the more important part of learning the Python as a language than the language syntax itself. Because the language syntax, that the system helps you if you don't fully remember that how the syntax would be written. But the system does not really prompt you to import certain libraries and use certain functions which are already available in the library. So keep your eye on the different types of libraries that we would be using and different functions of the library that we would be using, so that whenever you have a need, you know that I need to import this library and I need to use this function from the library. So sys is one of the libraries in Python that you need to import if you want to use certain functions of that particular library. Is it clear?
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So coming back to, at certain places, you would like to raise an exception yourself and not really wait for uh, the system to raise the exception, or it may be a place where the system is not likely to raise an exception, but we would like to determine or we would like to raise an exception ourselves. So, for example, if the value of x is more than 5, suppose if we are doing some operation and we want that the system should execute the rest of the code, only if the value is more than 5. Now, from the system perspective, whether the value of x is 5 or 7, it does not really matter. And therefore, we would like to raise an exception explicitly ourselves. And to be able to do that, we use the syntax raise exception, and then we define what do we want the exception to be. So I could say that x should not exceed 5. the value of x was so and so. And you see here, this is another way to use the f string. Earlier, we had used the f string to assign the value inside the curly braces. This is another way of doing it. Or we could just write this, and it will still function. Okay, so here, since it is inside the f string, I need to give the value here. So at this point of time, the system breaks, but it shows that exception x should not exceed 5. The value of x was 10. So this is the way where in certain cases, if we want to raise an exception, this is what we would use. Now, the next important thing in the exception handling is that if I want to avoid some of these things and if I want to check things upfront, so for example here, rather than raising an exception, I would like to test that whether the value of x is more than 5 or less than 5, or if you want to check that whether my list is a list or is that a string, I would like to ensure that the variable name my list is always a list, or I would like to ensure that the variable x is an integer and not a float. So these are the things we would like to ascertain upfront before even I run the program. So that is achieved by what we call as the assert. So if we if this condition is not met, it will show me an assertion error. So let's see. So both of these are fine. I had defined x here. X is carrying a value of 10. There is no problem here. Now here, if I say here, I want to continue only if x is a float. And that is what I am trying to check even before the program runs. So I would like to assert. It means that it will check whether this is float or not, and it will, if not, then it will show me an assertion error. And that error I am catching here. But even if I don't catch the error here, it will still show me an assertion error. So see here, it will raise an error and it will show that this is an assertion error, and the system can stop there. So if you want to check certain condition even before I execute the code, then I use the word assertion. Otherwise, if the exceptions are raised, I would like to catch those exceptions and I would like to see those exceptions. This is the way that we handle the exceptions in Python. Now there were two problems which we encountered yesterday, and we need to see how to handle that. So I'll take you to the place where we were facing that problem. Or maybe I will just write the code once again. Yeah. I think when we were defining the length as a variable, it was creating a problem. So just let me introduce one line of code here. What I was doing was that I was saying len is equal to length of names, suppose here. And then having assigned that, I was trying to use the length once again, and it was saying that this is an integer and you can't call a function on the integer. I think we should get the same problem here. Okay, see, no, this is the problem is different. So it is Okay, so you see here that so here what is happening is that len is a system command. When normally I had encountered this for the first time, that I used system command as a variable name, and then after that I was trying to use that system command again, and now it is carrying, it is being treated by the system as a variable, and it was not executing. So the len is not being treated um, as a system command, but it was treating this as a variable. I think we'll, it was there in our this workbook. Let's come here where we were facing this problem. So in those cases, what I had to do was to delete that variable, because again and again as we were going along, it was treating the system command as a variable. Okay, not a problem. We'll just continue to deal with this. So now, if you see here, it should give me the, if I don't have, now if I remove this and still try to run, it should have given me the length of the variable names here, because names is a list here, but it's not doing, because len, I assign this as a variable. So what I need to do is first delete that variable, and then it should. Okay, so it is. Okay, so, sorry, here I have not run this one, so the error is coming a different one. Okay. So the earlier error, the names is not defined, was coming because the previous cell was not run. Now let's try to do this. And then again, I ask for. You see here, this is the error that we were encountering yesterday, that first it is assigning the length of name. So here it is so here it is saying that int object is not callable. It means that len, it is not recognizing as a command here. So that is because I have used that as a variable now, and therefore I used to delete this variable. Then let's see what happens. So I deleted the variable length because that was in the memory. Now it is assigning again the length of name. So here, if you see, len is working as a syntax, as a Python syntax. So it is evaluating the length of names and assigning it again back to a variable called length. So when I say print len, it is treating this as a variable and it prints 3. Then I call the same command. Now it is not able to give me the length of the array or the length of the list here. So the same command I'm using here, and it's not working. It is throwing an error because this len has now become a variable. This is the problem that we are encountering here. So in some cases, when you have something assigned to a variable and you want to release that variable, then we will use the command delete. So once I say delete, and so if I repeat that command here, then we should again print the length of the names here. You see? So in case a variable that is there in the memory, and if you want to release that, we will use the del and then give the name of the variable to be able to delete that. So that would be a handy function at certain points in time. But it was for the first time that I even tried using a variable name, which is actually a syntax, and that's where I got a problem. So this is one way to release the variable from the memory, and then you can continue to work. The second problem that we encountered yesterday, and that was a silly mistake which I did, was when we were using the AND function.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah, tell me.
Can we initialize that time also? Len equal to 0.
Yes, yes. We can initialize the variables. You can initialize the variables. So for example, if you that initialization we had done when we were trying to print here. So for example, whenever we say that string is equal to so and so, every time this is the initialization. Let's see. So when we are saying names is equal to so and so, we are initializing the variable names. When we're saying person is equal to Ram, we are initializing the variable person as Ram. Similarly, when we say x is equal to 10, we are initializing the variable as 10. Or when we go to the while loop, when we are saying I is equal to 0 or n is equal to 1, this is the
No,
initialization.
no. Actually, del len in place of del len, I replace L equal to 0. Is it possible?
But what is that you would actually be, why would you be trying to put an initialization there? Because the purpose is that that variable I want to release from memory. So does not matter whether it is 0 or not. So if you want to delete only if its value is 0, then you need to give an if condition that if x is equal to 0, then delete x. That is what we will have to do. Or am I not able to grasp your question?
Once again, you repeat why we use del len first time.
No, so I, because del len first time, what is happening is that as we are running the code, len is already there in memory. Okay, so now having deleted here, now I don't really need to do it for the first time. What happens is that whether you run this cell or any other cell, whatever variable names are used, it remains in the memory. Since I had run this cell earlier, the len is still in the memory, and that's why I was giving that as a first line, because that is still in the memory. Let's try out. Now that I had deleted here, you are saying that it's not causing a problem when it is trying to run the first line. Okay, now let me, so what I'm doing now is that after deleting, I'm again assigning it to len. So when I run it next time, len as a variable will still be there in memory. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, so I used len as a syntax, assign the value to len as a variable, then I say print len, it has printed 3, then I deleted len, it has gone out of memory, then I again repeated this, now it is there in the memory. When I try to run this cell once again, it will first evaluate the right side of the assignment statement. When it is trying to run this, len is a variable, and therefore I'll get the same error. You see? So next time when I run this len as a variable is there in the memory, and that's why I am getting this problem, because this len, it is not treating as a syntax, but it is treating this as a variable. And therefore, if I want to run this command, first I have to delete that variable from the memory. So once I delete the variable from the memory, then it is able to execute this line. That's why the first line itself was del the delete the variable, because it does not matter whether it is the first line or subsequent line. What it sees is that, do I have that variable in the memory? And that's why that first line was there. So in case I delete this, then the first line need not be deleted. What you are saying that, let's see here, delete len is equal to 0. So it shows the syntax error, because when you are deleting a variable, at the same time you can't do an assignment. So the assignment and deletion can't be done at the same time. But if I want to delete on a conditional basis, I should do this. If len is equal to 3, and then I print len. So now it is showing me that this len is a function. Now if I say here, let's see what happens now. So earlier it showed that len is a function. Now, since the value of this len is 3, and I am asking it to delete only when the value is 2, it has not deleted len as a variable, and therefore it is still printing me the value of the variable. If I give this as 3, then you see that result is changing. Okay. The second silly mistake which I was doing yesterday was, in this, while running this code, the and I had used this and. So it happens when you work across different languages. Sometimes you get confused that whether it's a command in Python or some other language. So this and is actually what is called as the bitwise and this and is called the logical and. So I was using the bitwise and that's why the result was not coming. Now if we use the logical and, it will operate. So now let's see what the problem is here. So I is equal to 0, n is equal to 1. Okay, so names 1 we have not yet initialized, and that's why we are getting names 1 is not defined, because we have not run this cell in this session. So all these in a Python notebook, everything remains in the memory only until you are in the same session. So if you restart the session, all the variables would be lost. Or if you close the notebook and open again, all the variables would be lost. Your code will still be there, but the values of the variables would be lost. So I am running this again so that the names is initialized. think it's asking me to enter the person's name. Let's see here. So now this cell has run. So this names 1, names 2, names 3 are initialized, and these variables are there in the memory, so we can use them. Let's try to run this. So int object is not callable. Now the problem is again the same because the len is still in memory. So, and that's why this len is not giving me a len is not working as a function. So let me delete len, and then it should work. You see, so we ran this, we used the len as a variable in some other cell earlier, and that's why it was there in the memory. I deleted that, and then this len is functioning as a syntax. But let's now focus on what is happening in the while loop. So we are saying while I is less than length of names 1, the names 1 has 4 elements. So the value of this is 4. So we are saying that while I is less than 4 and n is less than 2. This is what I was trying to demonstrate earlier, that you can actually put several conditions. So when we are defining of a while loop, or for that matter an if, we don't need to give a single condition, we can give multiple conditions. And based on the evaluation of all the conditions that we are defining here, the subsequent code would be executed or it will exit the loop. So what happens in the first iteration? I is less than 4, the value of I is 0, I is less than 4. The value of n is 1. So n, it evaluates true. So both of these conditions are true. This is true and this is true. Since both are true, this entire condition after while is true, and if it is true, then it will execute the subsequent lines. So it is printing here that value I is 0 and the name at index 0 is Ram. Okay. Now after having executed this print command, now I becomes 1 and n becomes 2. Then it goes with these values and evaluates the while condition once again, and then it sees that I is less than 4. When this I, the value of I is 1, and that is less than 4. So this part is true. This part is true. But n has become 2, and my condition is n is less than 2. So this part becomes false. So true and false, that combines to false. And since the condition after while has become false, now it will not execute. But if I give the condition is n is less than equal to 2, then it will print 2 lines, and that you will see. Yeah. So now that length is not a variable, it will show that this name was not found. So name length is not defined. So I'll remove this and run again. Now you see it prints 2 lines because next time it comes here, the value of n is equal to 2, which, so the condition of n is less than or equal to 2 is still true, and therefore it prints the next line. But in the third iteration, this condition becomes false, and therefore it will not print. Now if we make, say, n is less than 9, then this condition will get violated first. So it will print all the 4 names, and then it will say, it will print all the 4 names. So the first condition, when this becomes 4, then the first condition becomes false, this second condition becomes true, and therefore it will print all the 4 names, and then it will end. The while loop will end. So this is how the AND, or these are the logical operations. So we'll just use AND and OR. We will come to later that under what circumstances you use that ampersand. That is also an AND operator, but that's not a logical operator. That's called the bitwise operator, which we'll come to that at sometime later. Any questions so far? If not, then we go to our backpack problem. Throughout every day, we have been dealing with that problem. And today, I hope that we are able to come to a conclusion of that problem by writing the full set of codes. So going back to the process that we followed, we said that first thing is in solving any problem, first we need to formulate the problem and try to convert that into a language which our system would understand. And we formulated the problem and said that let's first find out which item out of the 8 items that we have, which item is having the highest value per unit of weight, because that is the first one we would like to take. Then we say fill as much as we can with the highest value item. And when we say as much as we can, either we will run out of the space in the bag or we will run out of the item itself. So first we need to see that which item has the highest value. So we arrange in that fashion, that which one I should be taking first, which one I should be taking second. Then we start filling our bag and we see that how much quantity of the first item I am putting in my bag. Then we say that having put that many items in the bag, let's find out what is the weight. And now that I have consumed that weight, the available space in my bag is only whatever is the maximum amount minus whatever we have put. And this process we will repeat until we have reached our limit. So first we defined our data frame. We put all the information that we had about the item name, the value, weight, and numbers. We put that into a data frame. We transpose the data frame. We gave a name to the data frame because that is easier to operate with. So now I have my data in place. So the first 3 steps that we did is only to put the data into in a format which will be very easy for us to operate with. Then we operate the first step in our logic, and that first step in our logic was finding the value by weight, and that we do by dividing the value by the weight. So here the 2 concepts that we learned here was that I can add a column to the pandas data frame and assign value to that in the same step. So when we say df value by weight is not a column until now. So it will create a new column, value by weight, and then each element. So I don't have to give a for loop here that go to the row 1, compute, and then assign. We don't have to do that. And these are the benefits of operating with pandas, because the operations across the columns, operations across the table, all of these become very easy. So you just say that value by weight, and then it substitutes the value by weight for each column by column by column, and puts that under a column by name value by weight. So now we have got the value by weight. We want to sort it because the first item that we want to select is the item which has the highest value by weight, and that we do by sorting. So just reading this line, we are saying that take the data frame df and perform the sort by values operation. And since now we are saying sort, it is very natural for it to ask that what do you want to sort by. Then we are saying that sort by value by weight. And these are the 2 optional statements. We said that the default one is ascending, but since we want the data in the descending order, we say ascending is equal to false. And ignore index is required if you want to re-index. If we don't use that, then the original index, what is appearing here, would still be retained. So now I have sorted. Then we need to execute the second part of our logic, that having got the items arranged by the value by weight, it means that most valuable per unit of weight is on the top. Then I want to select this one first. And how much of item F can I put in my bag? That is the second part of the logic. So it's very obvious here that since I have only one item there, I can put only one item. But how would the system know that yes, now I need to put only one item? That is what we were coming to our for logic. So we are saying here for I in range length of df, it means that for every item in my data frame, perform the following operation. It means that whatever is now the command line in after the for loop, it will go and execute lines one by one. So first we are just assigning the value. So it is saying that take the first element in the column weight and then assign that to a variable weight I. So I am just storing these values to different variables. So the second part of my logic is getting operated here. So first I'm saying that first assess what is the available weight limit, and we have defined that uh, weight limit is 20, but how much is available at this point in time? What is available is the weight limit minus whatever I have consumed. So when I am starting, I have initialized the weight limit total weight to 0 because as yet I have not put anything into my bag, and therefore the value is 0. So in the first iteration, the available weight evaluates to 20 because it is 20 minus 0, and we are taking the maximum of that and 0 because the available weight should not go into negative. So in the first iteration, this value is 20. Now, when we execute this, many times you would like to see that what is happening inside this loop. So what I may do is that I ask it to print this one so that we can see what is the value here. Okay. Okay. So df is not yet defined. So we'll run the code from the beginning. We should have run all of these. Yeah. Now you see here what is happening here. So we can run this again. The error weight, there is in the data frame, it is not finding weight. Let's run this again. Why is this problem? Okay. So we created the data frame. That is fine. It is transposing it. It's creating the headers. It's creating the new column. Then we are sorting it by weight, and we are seeing the weight here. These are the slice operation which we don't really need to worry about. all the slicing operations. This one will come back to. See df just before executing it. So it has weight. Yeah. So I have given a print command now inside the for loop, and I am saying that after every iteration, print the available limit. So in the first iteration, my limit is 20. Then it takes the first item, which has a weight of 100 grams, and I have only one item, so I can select only one. And therefore, having put that, in the next iteration, the available weight is 19.9. So I know that the system is actually doing the right computation. Okay. Now in the third iteration, having taken, so now it will take the 5 items, each weighing 0.5 kg, so 2.5 kg, and therefore it should reduce by further 2.5 kg, so it becomes 17.4. Now we know that my computation of the available limit is happening properly. Then I say that how many items I can take, that is, then that computation is done by whatever is the total available weight I have, divide that by the weight of an individual item, and then take the minimum of that number or whatever I have. So this is what that either I run out of space or I run out of the items. So it will show me that what is the total number of items that I can take. Now I can print that also. So you see, it first prints the available limit, then it prints how many items I can take of that item, which is the first row. Then it shows the available limit. Then I take 5 items. Then my limit becomes 17.4. Then I take 3 items of the third one, and each of that is weighing 15 kg. So here, even though there are 8 items, I'm able to select only 3. That's what this line of the code is saying. Minimum of either the available weight by the weight of the item or the number of items. So here number of items I have 8, but this one evaluates to only 3. So I can take only 3, and that becomes 15 kgs. So I am left with 2.4, and that's how it goes on operating. So putting a print command inside a loop is a very good practice, because then you see that what is the value of those items after each iteration, and therefore whether it is doing the right thing or not. So if I print the total weight also, now you will see that the cumulative weight, it is showing the available as 20. I selected one item. Total weight I have put inside the bag is 0.1. In the next iteration, available weight is 19.9. I select 5 items, and the total weight which I have put inside the bag is 2.6, and so on and so forth until I reach the end. And then I also initialized an empty list, and whatever is the number of items I select, I just go on putting that in that empty list. So now I have got the number of items which I have selected, and then I see that how many. So item number 1, I have got one count. The second one, I take 5 of them. The third one, I take 3 of them. Fourth one, I take 9 of them, and then my bag becomes full. Now I take the items which I have selected and I put that in my table, so that in the same table I have the that information also. Why it is giving so many errors? Okay. Oh, I have not run this cell. That's why it is not converting this into Twiggy frame. So that's another thing that you will have to notice, that if you are defining certain variables or doing some operation in one cell, then you must run that cell. So now I have got of which item, how many of item F I chose 1, item B I chose 5, and so on, it goes on. But having done that, I would like to see what is the cumulative weight that I have selected. And then I do the same type of operation. I create a column by weights selected, where I multiply the weight with the selected count and some more operations, and then I get the result. Now I have the complete solution here, which shows that item number 1, I have chosen one of the item F. The total weight because of that is 0.1, with the value of that is 25,000, and the cumulative weight so far is 0.1. Cumulative value is 25,000. As I select the second item, the weight of the second item is 2.5. The value of the second item is 5 lakhs. The cumulative weight becomes 2.6. So if you see, when I give this sum command, it actually takes a cumulative sum of each row. So the cumulative sum becomes 2.6 and cumulative value becomes 2.5. And therefore, in the end, out of the limit of 20 kg, I have been able to fill 19.85 kg, and the total value of that is 20,43,000. And that's the maximum that you can take away. So that was at the end of these 5 sessions. We have been able to solve one real problem using Python. Okay. Any questions so far?
CumSum is not getting.
Yeah, CumSum is a command which will actually compute the cumulative sum of this particular column. So if you see here, the weights selected, that's the column here, which is showing me 0.1, 2.5, 15, 2.25, and so on. Now, if I give CumSum, it will compute the totals going row wise. So when it comes to row 1, the total is 0.1. When it comes to row 2, it will now add the value which is there in row 2 to the value which we have arrived earlier. So 0.1, it will add 2.5. Then it will add 15 to 2.6, that becomes 17.6. Then I add 2.25 to this. So it gives you the cumulative total of all the rows that we have. That is the cumulative sum.
Okay, thank you.
And the same thing I'm doing here for the value also. So it gives me now just it's a running total. Cumulative sum is nothing but the running total, as you may have used in Excel also sometime. But there you have to define the formula. Here we can just give the CumSum, and then it will compute for the entire range. So again, over the weekend, you should go through this example and try to understand it. So my objective was to be able to solve it's not an easy problem to solve. So I wouldn't say it's a very complex problem, but we have been able to solve a problem using Python, which is of medium complexity. So we have used several concepts in Python, like how to create a data frame, how to create a list, how to do the sorting, and then how to write a for loop, how to use different commands inside the for loop. That we have done. But the beauty of this is that now that we have written this logic, can I solve similar problems with the same logic? So for example, if I want to create a menu builder in a restaurant, and we say that on the customer comes in and he says that, I don't want to take more than 1,000 calories in my meal. And then he says that I want to get these 1,000 calories at the minimum cost. So the restaurant has, suppose, several items here. It sells burger, pizza, soft drinks, apple pie, potato chips, French fries, salad, and chicken wings. It may have more items, but we have taken example of certain 7 or 8 items here. Then I know the calories that each of these item contains. So one burger, suppose, has a calorie of 600 calories. One pizza has 700 calories. One soft drink has 300 calories, and so on. And I have the price. At the same time, the customer would say that no. Suppose here the French fries, just because it has suppose low price and high calories, that doesn't mean that I will only eat French fries. So what he is saying there is that how many of each of these items, what is the maximum number that I want in my meal? In a single meal, maybe I can take 2 soft drinks, but I don't want to take 2 burgers. I can take, since I like chicken wings, I can actually go up to 4 chicken wings plate in one meal. So here I'm just defining that what is the total maximum number of item that I can take in a single meal. So if this information is available, can you create a menu for a person which will give him the required number of calories in the lowest cost? Now, if you see this problem and the backpack problem, is there a difference or are they looking very similar? And if they are looking very similar, the question would be that can I use the same code for building the menu in this restaurant? So first of all, do you find that the problem is more or less the same? Or are these looking completely different problems? What does it look like to you? Any response?
So look like similar. There is a weight constraint. Here is a calorie constraint.
Okay,
And
so you are on the correct line, and that's what is the principle of abstraction in the computational thinking. So now, if you see at one level of abstraction, that in the previous problem, I had certain number of items available in the home. Here, there are certain items available in the restaurant. So earlier, the item A, B, C, D, E. Now, it is the same as from the system perspective, A, B, C could be burger, pizza, soft drink. Then we had the weight of the problem, and here weight of each item. Here I have the calorie of each item. So even though these are two different things altogether, in the house we had discussed that there was some gold and some silver and some bronze statue and things like that. Now from the system perspective, can I replace burger with gold or pizza with silver or soft drink with the bronze statue? It is the same thing. That is what the abstraction you will have to think about in the abstract terms. The calories is for the system, I am just giving a number. So these numbers, whether it is the number of calories or these numbers represent weight, from the system perspective, it doesn't really matter. It is just doing computation with some numbers. So whether I feed him the calories or whether I feed the program the weight, for the program, it doesn't matter. Similarly, there it was the value, and here it is the price. And there here I am saying that how many maximum numbers I can take in a single meal. And there it said that how many maximum number of items you have available in the house which the thief can take. So that's the principle of abstraction, which is one of the very important, and I would dare to say that this is the most important thing that you need to develop as a data scientist. So now we see that if we see at one level of abstraction, on the face of it, they are looking different because there is a gold, silver, and bronze statue. Here I have burger, pizza, and soft drink. Then I have the uh, weight of each item. Here I have the calorie of each item. There the value of each item. Here the price of each item, and how many items you have available. So it actually becomes a very similar problem, but with one difference. That difference is that in that case, we were trying to maximize the value. And here I am trying to minimize the price. So I want to take 1,000 calories by paying the minimum price. There I was wanting to take 20 kgs and I was trying to take the maximum value. So the problem remains the same, but with just one twist. So if I can handle in the same piece of code the maximization problem and minimization problem, then with the same code, I can handle maybe multiple other varieties. So how do we actually do it? So if we have to, one way is that we could copy this code and just go on replacing it with, so the first step is that I initialize these. So I have the food items and I put that in the same format as we had done earlier. So earlier it was A, B, C, D, E. I just put the food item names as burger, pizza, soft drink. Then I put the calories value, price value, all this in the form of a list. And why are we doing it? Because that is how the system would understand that I am passing it a list. But these lists have different names. So one simple way of doing it could be that I just copy that code and replace that with uh, the new names. Or if you don't want to do that, maybe we can give the same names for the list as we have used earlier. In that case, I don't even have to replace the names. So let's try doing this. We come here and where are we defining? So it's on the top. Yeah. So I just override that and I can say items is equal to food items. Weight is equal to calories. Value is equal to price. As you can see that this is the process you should follow. That is, if there is something in the memory, you should rather give the time for the system to prompt you. Otherwise, we can make mistakes. So this numbers is equal to, what was that? Max numbers. So I have reinitialized these variables to the values that we had put for building a menu. And then if I run the code, it should give me the result. So if you see here, it has become A, B, C, D has become burger, pizza, soft drink. All these other things are replaced here. We do the same thing. We transpose it and we get the burger has a price of 250 and a calorie of 600. then you give the column names. We'll just live with the same column names here so that we save some time. We can again operate it here. Now there was one difference here is that in the previous one, we were trying to maximize the value, and therefore we are putting the item which has the highest value by weight on the top. Now here I need to do the reverse, and therefore I will make the ascending is equal to true. I have not run this one. We ran this one. Okay. This is sort value by weight, and then ascending is equal to true, which is fine. We'll just skip these things. Then we see here df. So we get the value by weight, and here it is arranged in the ascending order of the. So here it becomes the how many calories do I get for every rupee, and then it goes into the ascending order. And if I so here the weight limit, I am looking for 1,000 calories. Let's see here. So I have selected some items. So I'm just going on running the same thing, and we'll see the result in the end. And we'll also run this one, and then we see the result. So what are the items that I have chosen? So my menu is ready now. If I want to have something at the minimum price and want to get 1,000 calories, I select one soft drink. That gives me 300 calories. That costs me 50 rupees. Then I choose, it allows me to choose one French fry, which again, it allows me to take only one. And the calorie is 350, and therefore my cumulative calorie becomes 650, and my total price of these two items becomes 130. Now, even though pizza gives me a good calorie for a lesser price, I can't take it, because if I am going to take pizza, I will take a minimum of one, and it will give me 700 calories. And having picked the soft drink and French fries, I can't really afford to have a pizza. So it will skip pizza, it will take chips, and then it will take a salad. So it is giving me 1,000 calories at a price of 330, which is the cheapest that you can get for a 1,000 calorie menu. Now, if somebody else comes in and says that I want to have a meal, but he is not that health conscious, and says that, okay, I will go for 2,000 calories, then we just need to change this weight here. And then if I run the same thing, it should give me, my selections may have changed. Let's see how it goes. Okay, now see what is happening here, that since df was already in the memory and we had not replaced that, it is concatenating that to the previous df. So we'll maybe start from defining the df once again. Otherwise, it is just taking the previous df which we had computed and doing the adding it on the same. So these things, rather than running one by one, I can also go and see run time and run after. So it will run one by one, all of these, and we don't have to execute that one by one. So we are doing this sorting. This is, all these things are not required because these are just giving. So I see the df, And then when I run it for 2000, I see which items have been selected. And then I concatenate. And then I do the rest of the computation and I get the result. So here is my menu. So for 2000, it is taking one soft drink, one French fry. Now I can afford to have one pizza and two packs of potato chip and one salad. So that gives me 1950 calories for a price of 630. So the idea here was that once we have solved one type of problem, our computational thinking should say that, okay, how I can use the same concept in other areas. So the reuse is a very important thing, and all the libraries that we talk about, different libraries, actually the reuse libraries. But as we start solving the business problems, you can also apply the same concept in many other contexts. The same thing, I came across a, a problem somewhere where it says that, okay, a family has gone out for traveling to, say, London. There are several things that the family can do. It can go for uh, Disneyland ride, it can go to a museum, it can go for a boat ride, it can go for a theater, and things like that. And each of them has its own cost. And then say that, okay, what is the total, uh, if you have to give us a delight point, that which one is giving you more delight, and if you can quantify that, can you really build a sort of an itinerary, or what are the things that the family should be doing? And different families would have different preferences, so you have a preference builder for your London tour, because you will have, you would like to maximize the total delight for the family in a given budget. There are several types of the problems which can be solved if we use the principle of abstraction. Now, we have seen that we have just replaced the names, but there is an another way. So we would like to use the same code multiple times in different contexts. And in the next session, we will see that how using a single piece of code without changing any of the variables and without having to rerun all these things that we have done, using the principle of the classes and the function, we can create a reusable code. And that would be the session that we'll be starting with in the next week. If you have some time, yesterday I could not show is that there was a question that what kind of projects we would be doing in the course. So I'll just give you a glimpse of that. Bear with me for about 5-10 minutes. So this is a sample of the things that we would be doing going forward in the machine learning. So machine learning has different types of algorithms that we will be experimenting with. One class of algorithms is called the supervised learning. In the supervised learning, we have data and we have the output from the previous data. So for example, uh, the if we are trying to predict a price of a house, then we will have the attributes of the house and the price at which it was sold in the past. And based on that, we will try to make the prediction for the house. So supervised learning is where you have, and the price here is called the label. It means that you have the features available, or the different parameters of the house is available, or different attributes of the house is available. At the same time, the result that we are trying to achieve, even that is available for the past data. So that is called the label. So we will learn about a regression problem trying to predict the price of the house. Then we will come across, we will take up the classification problem, where we will try to read certain handwritten digits. So what I have in my data set is numbers that people have written by hand. And then we will ask the computer to identify that whether this is 7 or 5 or 0 or 8. So that is the classification problem that we will handle, which will be partly the, so reading the image of a digit and saying that whether that digit is 5 or 6 or 0, things like that. The same problem will also extend and do another classification problem, which is the segregating the iris flowers. This is a very classical database that everyone learns in the machine learning, which is you have certain data available about different types of the iris flowers. And there are three types of the iris flowers is Sentosa, versicolor, and there is one more. So given the different attributes of the flower, for example, how long is the petal and what is the width of the petal, because these species of the iris flower, they are distinguished based on the length and width of their petals and the sepals. So if I have that data, can I train my system to say that this is a Sentosa type of iris flower and this is the um, versicolor type of iris flowers? That segregation would be these two examples we would take for classification. Then we come to clustering, which is the type of the unsupervised learning, where the labels are not really defined or the categories are not defined in the data which I process. So without any prior information about what kind of data that is, we will get some data from the different people who visit the mall, and based on their gender, age, and spending patterns, we want to group them into homogeneous groups so that my marketing campaign can be targeted. So we would try to find out from the data itself that are there homogeneous groups between the visitors to the mall, and then we'll also learn about the reducing data dimensions. That's more of a technical thing that we'll learn. Then we'll go to deep learning and we'll learn about the neural networks. In the neural network, first we will try to do is that the problems that we have solved earlier, we'll try to solve the same problems with the help of the neural network. So the earlier problem of housing problem or iris data or the digit recognition, all these things we'll try to solve with the neural network so that we get a grasp on the deep learning. And then we'll take up some interesting thing. For example, we will attempt creating a new music by ourselves. So our AI or the machine learning, it will create a new music. So how do we do that? We will feed a lot of songs into the system, and then we'll say, can you create a new song for me? That is what we will do. And in that course, we'll also understand the concept of the recurrent neural network. Then we will move to the natural language processing, and the kind of projects that we will do is we will fetch certain articles from the internet, Wikipedia, and then say that is this article pertaining to sports, or is this about machine learning, or is this about politics? Can the machine itself read that article and tell me that this is an article about sports? So that we will do by using certain concepts like TF, IDF, and bag of words and so on. Then we'll also give the system certain books to read. So for example, we will take Mahabharata, the entire 18 chapters of Mahabharata. We'll put that into our system, and then we'll ask the questions to the machine, and that will be very interesting. So for example, uh, you know, all of us have taken so many years to read Mahabharata, but we will see that within fraction of the second, the system will read the entire Mahabharata, and it will be able to answer questions like, if Pandu is the brother of Dhritarashtra, tell me who would be the brother of Nakul, and it will answer as that Sahadev is the brother of Nakul. Similarly, we will ask the question that, show me the other names of Krishna, and it will show me the other names of Krishna. So some of these things actually becomes very interesting, that you are able to do this kind of thing with a very little practice and experimentation with the language. So the system would read Mahabharata, or for that matter, a book from Shakespeare, and I can ask the question about who is Romeo or who is Juliet, and it will be able to answer me to a large extent. After that, we'll go into the image processing, and we will apply the convolutional neural network, and there we will ask the machines to, identify a human face, or the face recognition that has become so common nowadays on Facebook and Google Photos and all that. We will try to do the same thing, and then we will also attempt a few examples on what we call as the generative networks. It means that can the system itself generate certain data like an human face. So these are the uh, typical things that we can do during the time that we'll have available. I have lot many other examples also. So if the group has a, or if a group or an individual has interest in doing something very specific in certain area, then we can take uh, the examples accordingly. But this is a sample list of things that we would be doing during our machine learning part. Any question or any clarification, any observation?
Very nice. See.
Okay, so I would urge you to spend some time over the weekend in going through whatever we have done till now, because if the gap between the pace at which I am moving and the gap and the pace at which you are moving, if that becomes wider, then you will start facing problem as we go along. Okay, so make sure that we are going at the same pace, and the pace I am wanting to keep it a bit fast, because all of you are from, have some experience behind you, so you should be able to catch up. But wherever you feel that maybe I am going faster, then communicate with me and ask me to go slow, either on the WhatsApp one-on-one, or even during the class you can interrupt me, and then we'll find time to go through the concepts which you are finding a bit difficult to understand. So we'll end the session here, and we'll meet again on Monday morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.